That's new. So I think we might be live now. If not, the recording will just kick in at some awkward moment in the middle of this. But I'm Meeghan Truelove. I'm the Director of Business Development at Schumacher for Creative Partnerships. And I am here today with Caroline Lindsell and Dylan O'Shea, who are the dynamic duo behind A Rum Fellow, the London-based design studio that's responsible for all kinds of gorgeous goodness. And we at Schumacher are lucky enough to represent their running yardage and a really beautiful special program of brocade panels that they have, all of which are made by hand in Guatemala with really incredible weavers. And, you know, as Caroline and Dylan often say, and as I believe also, you can say kind of like handmade and made by hand like a million times, but until you can actually like get into it and start to understand it like on a really kind of like deeper level, the craft of it, it's, you know, that's when it really starts to sink in. So that's what we're going to do today. Also, we can save some time for questions at the end. So if anybody watching has questions, feel free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure we look at those as well. But Caroline and Dylan, welcome.
Hi.
Great to have you here. And why don't you start by just telling us a bit about how A Rum Fellow got started?
Okay. So I guess to kind of give, I mean, we've both got our own separate backgrounds that we essentially brought to the company, but to go bit way back on my background, I actually grew up on a farm, probably about an hour outside of London, and you know, it's a busy working family farm, and there I actually ended up spending a lot of time with my grandmother, who was a complete I guess crafter and hobbyist and knitter, sewer, and so it's actually her that kind of introduced me to this whole idea of making things. And although I guess my words wouldn't have been quite as eloquent at the time for describing it in this way, but I think it's that this idea that you could take all these raw materials that were quite simple, that didn't necessarily mean anything in their original form, and then create something new and beautiful out of them. And along that way, the process was also really enjoyable. I mean, you know, at the same time, not everything works out, it's trial and error. But I feel that's something I've definitely kind of taken through my life and into what we do now. But it's, I guess, probably a little bit later down the line, I started making my own clothes. And so from a very young age, I knew I wanted to design. And originally I chose to get into fashion. And so that's what I went and studied at university. And then actually after I left, my first job that I had was in America. And so I came straight over to America and worked for Abercrombie. And whilst we obviously know I took a different route in life later down and came into interiors, it was a really good experience for me, kind of understanding that how you take essentially a 2D sketch, you know, a pretty picture on the paper, and turn it into this 3D piece, like a real life item. And to do that, you know, you need to think about the fabric, you need to think about how it's going to hang, you need to think about your trims, your pattern needs to be right. So it's all those important factors in there. And then, but also what we do at A Rum Fellow, it was really introduction into understanding a supply chain and, you know, what it takes to then make something and produce something and then sell it out, I guess, the other end. And then fast forward a little bit, I before I left America, I went to California for the sunshine, a stop trip back, I guess, you know, before kind of knowing that I was going to come back to maybe a rainier climate. Although actually, obviously today we've got it's
looks
really
nice.
hot.
Yeah.
It's really hot and we've got the lovely sunshine. But and so I moved to California and I worked for a surf company over there. So I was overseeing designing their swimwear, and obviously swimwear, it's all about color and pattern. And for me, that was a real kind of start or an immersion in the world of pattern and color, which I've very kind of firmly stayed a part of. And so going from it kind of being more about creating and drawing a garment to it being creating a pattern and something beautiful. And I think also there's something with pattern and cut, you know, it does give you a feeling, you know, a joyfulness or an emotion. It creates some emotion, color and pattern. And I really, you know, that's something, an idea that felt very important to me. And again, something I've taken with me. And then I eventually moved back to the UK and to London, where at some point I met Dylan, the other half of A Rum Fellow, but obviously also my partner in everything. And I still stayed working in fashion when I got back, but I found that, you know, I was working on these garments and these pieces and these ideas and concepts, and everything was moving so fast. There were these ideas that I wanted to develop further or more creatively or experiment with. And, you know, in the pace of where I was working in, you know, that just wasn't possible. And then at the same time, I had kind of Dylan whispering in my ears about the idea of starting a business together, which, I mean, it's something, you know, he'd been probably talking about since we met, but he obviously has his own background and angle that he brought to the table.
So I suppose,
So Dylan, what put that bug in your ear? Like what? So tell us about your background and you know, kind of like how you came to this moment.
Sure. I went to university and did a course called International Development, which was very kind of impactful on kind of my understanding of how the world works, I suppose. And it was an amazing course. And it looked at international development and processes of change and how to address poverty and inequality in a very multidisciplinary way. So, you know, it went through politics and economics, through environmental sciences, through social sciences, anthropology. So it gave a very sort of broad outlook on these enormous issues that you know, are everywhere around the world. And kind of towards the end of the course, you know, many people who do this course will go into sort of larger organizations, big NGOs and that kind of route. But I was sort of left with this feeling of my personal view that I'd come to really was more about trade rather than aid, and less of a top-down approach where people from our societies go to another culture and kind of direct people on what the problems are and how to solve them. I kind of feel more the approach to me that resonates more with me is to kind of facilitate people to be the masters of their own change, and you know, to give people the tools, give people the financial capacity. They'll find their own route and they'll make the right decision for themselves. And that's just very much sort of where I was at the end. And so I then went to go and work with my brother who had a fashion agency. So it sort of took a quite different route. But I learned a lot during that time of about sales and about marketing, about, you know, how a smaller business works. And there's quite a lot of sort of entrepreneurs in my family. It's just something that you know, members of my family seem to do. It's quite a natural route to take. I don't know if they're sort of less risk averse kind of thing, but and so I'd always had this kind of, you know, at some point I find what I want to do. And around that time, I was seeing a lot of sort of fair trade businesses that were doing fantastic work, but I always felt that the actual product was never quite as polished or as good as it could be. It was almost like a lot of the effort, a lot of the thought had gone more into the structure of the business, the actual, you know, the way of working and producing, which is really important. But the product was kind of left as it was nearly an afterthought. And
what you needed was a talented designer.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I sort of had this thought in my mind, and I'd sort of quit that job, and then went to go and work for another for a charity where we took furniture that was being thrown out of UK schools across the country. And then which often was, you know, sometimes it was nearly new. And it's amazing what gets thrown out in a Western country, and then sending those into large containers to set up schools in countries around Africa. So it was about sustainability, about education, and it was a great charity. But then still had this thing in my head that what I wanted to do, this business idea, and it was really when I met Caroline that we were both at a point in our lives where we'd had our experiences, and we'd had, you know, professional kind of, we'd been on our professional career journey already. And it was quite a good point for us, because we weren't green, we knew how the world worked, and we had our experiences. And so we started then with, you know, shall we do something ourselves? And this kind of idea came about. And really at the start, it was quite an idealistic way of making a business, because it was about what do we want to live in our lives as much as what we want to do business-wise. So business-wise, we wanted to make it about a design-led business that was very much, as I was saying, putting the product at the forefront, but having it backed up by really fantastic quality and amazing designs. But then, you know, it's built with integrity. And those are the three pillars of what we do. It's design, it's quality, and it's integrity. And that's really what we built A Rum Fellow on.
Yeah. I was just saying, and then from a creative side, whilst, you know, I wanted to move away from the area that was in, I still, you know, I had this love for pattern and color. I still love textiles, and in talking it through with Dylan, we felt that we could make a route and essentially kind of tickle those boxes and create this business together. In the early pathway into it, we love travel, and so we went over. We really actually focused on Central and South America to start with.
So you didn't know exactly where you might want to work. You kind of went on a bit of a wander to see what was out there. And
but we were very much, it was narrowed down almost instantly, because we knew we were going to work with textiles, and we knew we both love color. I mean, you're wearing quite funny. I'm wearing yellow trousers. There's a lot of color in our lives, and we're both very drawn to geometric shapes and patterns. And so South America, Central America, it's got it all there.
And also we did know as well, which is very important to what we do, that there are these traditional crafts and ways of making things, but, you know, it may be different for us in this country where things like that have closed down and become more machine orientated in lots of areas. Like there, we knew that there were plenty of artisans on the ground still practicing these crafts and highly skilled. And so we really saw, you know, whilst we did kind of wander around a few different countries, we really saw this opportunity there and what we wanted.
And we kind of felt already there that if we connected with the right people, we could make a really good partnership. You know, that we know the fantastic weaving that they can do, or we're going to discover exactly what it was, but we knew it was there. And we knew that we could design things. We also knew we were connected to a larger market. So although it was a bit of wandering around, it was wandering around with intent, as it were. And when
you got to Guatemala, was it kind of like this is it? Like, was it like pretty obvious to you straight away?
I mean,
yeah, we were blown away when we first got there, and literally everywhere you go, you see, even you're seeing the people, the women especially, in the traditional dress, and it's so beautiful, it's so colorful, the color of the buildings as well. There's no fear about color, where I feel here, your house is stone, or we don't have that kind of same sense. But so it was really exciting when we first got there. And also we've done a lot of research for the areas to go to try and find the weavers. And once we got there, we were actually able to make these connections and make these partnerships too, that we do have, that we have today to run the business.
Yeah, and there's so many artisans there that working in all different sort of techniques of textiles, that it's just a wonderful place to be if you're interested in doing what we do. And there's so many sort of avenues and routes you can go down, and people you can meet, and areas you can go and discover, that there was kind of there's never been a reason to look elsewhere, because there's so much more we can discover, there's so much more we can learn and sort of create there.
And I was just saying, I think it's also important as a business to not spread yourself too thin in too many areas. Like it makes sense to go deep there, and we did realize when we got there was a lot of infrastructure that we would have to set up to make this happen. We started working with weavers that weren't using tape measures or things like that, so we have spent a lot of time in the training that we've done, the structures that we've set up, the processes that we've set up. So it made sense to go really deep and create also these opportunities for the people there that are stable, and expand essentially on that. Yeah,
that's really important, because we don't want to bring opportunities and then it take it away again. You get what we do is quite personal, even from the starting of it, a weaver that working on a loom, weaving every single inch of that fabric with their hands, with the skills of their minds, essentially. And it's a very intimate process. You're very connected with what you're making. And then it's our relationship with the weavers, we're very involved in the whole process. And so the thought of sort of building something up and then leaving, would never be what we wanted to do. So it's something we want to be able to build something that can continue, and that these people can build their lives on it. In the same way that we will do. It's a very interconnected situation we've got there.
So should we look at the video that you shot of one of the weaving studios?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay, Katarina, can we watch that? And then maybe we'll watch it, and then you can tell us what we are watching after because it might be a little noisy, right? So kind of like on the other side of the video.
Yeah, or you can turn it down if you want.
I mean, I love it because it's like what it sounds like. So maybe we have the volume off.
Okay, you can't hear the sounds of all the looms. It's pretty, it's quite noisy.
You can hear the shuttles going and it all being pulled back. It is a very kind of it's quite a visceral kind of noise. You can really get the feeling of it, and you get the physicality of it as well. Like weaving on these looms here, it is a very physical process, and when you're weaving bolts of 50 yards, there's a lot of sort of constant physical action. It does require strength and a lot of concentration as well. So that's one of the bells and rear looms there with 29 shafts, and very complex loom setup. And then the one you'll see here is maybe we'll talk about it later. For the ISPA fabric.
But you can really see that everything is operated by hand, and even with the falserie fabrics, there's no, which is the more patterned designs, there's no punch card, there's no other machinery. It is
Yeah.
literally the weaver lifting all those shafts by hand and lifting every configuration for every single row, which, you know, I'm still blown away by what they can do and what
It's
they can
incredible.
Yeah.
And I just want to say also, if anyone wants to see that again, you can go to Caroline and Dylan's website, A Rum Fellow, and the video is there and you can watch it and hear the kind of like wonderful sounds that are going on in the studio and really absorb it. I mean, I love that there's also that one moment of like the woman spinning yarns, like literally everything is done by hand.
The whole process. And then
Yeah.
you've got, you know, once it's been woven, it's all checked by hand and sort of darned any little inconsistencies. And, you know, it's a real, you know, it's just a real process all the way through. And there's beauty in every single stage of it.
Yeah, we feel very connected to the products that we are producing because, you know, we know someone has, you know, that's someone's pride in their work that they created. So every single piece, whether it's the brocade panels or it's the roll fabric, it was all created by someone's skill and by hand. It's, you know, it's it's a piece that they took a lot of kind of care and love over making.
And so even in that weaving workshop that we just saw, there are a bunch of different techniques happening, right? Like you guys make semiplanes there, your ISPA and your Momo, and you make falsarias there, which we'll get into also, which I find fascinating. And then also Palopo, which has its own technique. So could you tell us a little bit, let's start with the semiplanes. Could you to kind of like talk us through the semiplanes? And I think you might have a piece of one there. Maybe you can kind of like do the kind of like Zoom thing of holding it up to your computer camera.
I was practicing earlier and sending it the wrong way. Let's hope I get it right. So the semi-plain fabric, I mean, the actual weave, so it's all woven by hand, obviously, but it's a plain weave. If you were to look at the actual structure of the design in it, it's really a check the way they've set the colors up. But what's come out really beautiful here, I don't know if we can see in here, but in both the warp and weft, I'm combining different colored yarns together here. So this one, the blush colorway, ranges from these soft to darker pinks to Russ, and then this pinky beige. So essentially it gives the cloth like a lot of life through the way that the color comes through. And I think this is definitely one of the ways that I approach design. I'm always kind of trying to layer in these different elements to it, and you know, try and combining different techniques. You know, it's not just about the pattern and design. I'm also studying with the weavers, the looms, and you know, what's possible for us to do there. And as you can heard from my background, you know, I wasn't trained as a weaver, but what I do have is this a very kind of mathematical and logical brain for understanding. So, you know, we really kind of sit down at the beginning of when I'm designing things and I try and kind of figure out with them what the possibilities are in these, and really trying to kind of explore on the hand nature of them. So I've just,
and then one of the things that I love the most about this semi-planes that that you make is that they're kind of like, I mean, they're not solid, but they sort of function as a solid, and they're kind of like next level solid / semi-planes because they can play that role in a room, but they also have so much more nuance to them, just like on a subtle level, that really, like, once you kind of like have it in your hand, it's so clear and they feel so good, and they're just really extraordinary.
It's definitely one of those fabrics that it's a subtle beauty, and the effect that it has within a scheme, it just adds a lot more depth than having, you know, combining it with a pattern fabric, a plain fabric. Having this, it gives some life to it, which we really love.
Yeah, and you really kind of hit the nail there. What I wanted to design in a plain cloth is it's almost as patterned as you can get with it being, plain, and that, you know, that really was the aim of the cloth.
Mm-hmm. And then tell us about the falsarias, which are made on those looms, but also have their own technique that I think is like centuries old, if I'm not mistaken. But
no, it is yes, no, it is a really old technique. So they're working on floor looms that they operate with the pedals down below, but at the same time we've got these 29 shafts that sit in the center of the loom, and so the weaver's having to lift all these shafts by hand, and the shafts lift the warp threads, and then the designs created by passing the shuttle, and just show this one, so passing the shuttle through with the colored yarn in, which creates the pattern. And because of the way this technique's working, so again, it's a supplementary weft, the design really lifts off the base cloth, which is again another thing that we love, with this kind of texture and feeling. And so it's a pattern, but when you see it in a room, it does really, it sits away, and it has this kind of beautiful texture on its own.
And so the looms would have been introduced to Guatemala by the Spanish in around 1500. Okay. But then with the falsaria, have you got home there? They because obviously the Mayan weaving technique would have been with the brocade, which we'll come to, but it's very elaborate. And so they adapted that loom to add in as much color as they could do with it. And so you get this really sort of adapted technique, and you make these beautiful fabrics where you've got a lot more pattern and a lot more color.
Like this is holmwool, right? This pattern is holmwool.
Yeah.
And how many colors are in this one?
Oh gosh. At a guess off the top of my head, I'd say about 9 or 10.
Amazing.
So it's really kind of, it's really colorful and beautiful. We maybe don't quite have the same amount of limitless that we do when we're doing the backstrap and brocade weaving. It's pretty amazing that we can get this amount of colors through. And also again, because they're passing the shuttle by hand, it's not like we're stuck with the amount of cones that you can put into a machine. So that is why we are able to kind of go to this larger number of colors.
And that piece is narrow, but the running yardage that that you produce, that we carry, is actually about 54 inches wide. So for instance, holmwool is, available at that width, and the Semiplanes are available at that width.
So this one was the original looms for these is, I'm going to say in centimeters because my brain works that way, but it's 90 centimeters. So I don't know, 30 inches? No, that's more than that.
I know, I'm good with miles and kilometers, but centimeters and inches, and I'm okay with meters and yards, but for some reason centimeters and inches is dumb.
But essentially that's what all the looms are, that maximum, that width, 90 centimeters, and then across the country. And then it's one of those ways that we've been working of sort of adapting old technologies, heritage technologies, to try and bring them into as a contemporary kind of environment as we can do, and relevant to a more sort of Western market, I suppose. And so we've actually widened the loom. So as far as all the fabric that Schumacher have got are at the wider 110 cm width, which is fantastic, because it just means that we can hopefully offer something that makes it a bit easier for your designers to work with, for our designers to work with. And it's also quite exciting that we're the only people who've got this type of fabric at that width. That's been,
And how many different falsaria patterns are you producing at this point? There are quite a few, like 5 or 6.
Yes.
I think 6.
6 at the moment. With I mean, the holmwool currently just comes in the one colorway, but the other designs are running more.
And it's fantastic, that the weavers who weave holmwool, they've been weaving it for their entire life. We're working with some like older guys who are just the most incredible master weavers. There might be a photo of him somewhere on our website.
Yeah, I think we can flip through the deck. Yeah, can we see the deck actually, Katarina?
This is just so fantastic. and his breadth of experience is just amazing.
But
So
at the
let's
same
flip
time,
through to that.
we've you know, whilst the weavers that we've met and chose to work with, we did feel like they're master weavers and really talented. At the same time, if anyone's kind of having any issues with things, we've really worked to kind of create this team that can really support each other or have extra training. You know, we kind of changed all our ways of spinning our yarns to the way one of our weavers was doing, because it's working at Don Hector.
Don Hector, it's such a nice
And
guy.
this is one of the falsarias, right? This is Lemba.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we really try to, because everyone's essentially learned what their father has taught them or what they've been able to teach themselves. So anywhere that we can kind of help with the process for people, or, you know, tweak things on the looms where it will work better or make the process kind of smoother. And
or take a weaver to another workshop and they can share ideas, and it's this whole kind of working together to share knowledge and experience. That's been a really useful approach.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
really been a really kind of communal experience for us. Yeah.
Katerina, can you keep flipping through? I think we have a few more shots of the actual workshop, and then we have some install shots of these running yardage fabrics being used. So this looks like it might be Palopo.
That's Palopo, yeah.
On the loom, okay. And then here's Holmol.
Holmol, yeah. And you can see it, I mean, you can see it here as well. You can see on the back there, and when after this I'll show you the yardage too, but it's sometimes you'll see it as well with the brocade. It shows that characteristic where the back is very beautiful too, and it really it's like showing the inner workings of the engine, of how it works and how it's sort of constructed. Which yeah, it's quite unique. And
the weavers are actually, I mean, that's the way they're working, so back to front, and they will pop a mirror underneath just to kind of keep checking as they're going. Yeah, as they go. Yeah, and it's pretty amazing that we, you know, we'll give them this paper artwork to start with that they will translate onto graph paper, but eventually once they've worked on a few rolls of fabric, they've memorized all the design in their head, and you don't really see them checking back at it. It's there, you know, if they need it, or for when they first start off in the morning or something. But it's amazing that they can memorize all this in their heads.
So cool. So let's look at the install shots just quickly. So anybody who hasn't seen some of these goods used can get some sense. You know, just these like incredible, you know, kind of like handmade, artisanal, all those words that kind of, you know, we use all the time, but in the case of these goods really are just so evident, but can be used in these super cool contemporary ways as well, and kind of like merging this kind of like heritage textiles with these, you know, fresh designs and these more modern uses. And so this one on the left is the Palopo. So the sofa is upholstered in Palopo, and then the pillows are different colors of Palopo. And would you tell us quickly about the construction of that also, because that has a particular construction too, right?
Yeah, so this is one of our more complicated fabrics that we're making on the loom. It actually has 2 warps to run it. So there's 2 rolls of yarn coming into the loom, and they are essentially integrated together at certain points of the weaving. So there's actually this ruffle that's happening in the fabric, but that will be woven in one stage, and then in another stage they're adding the other warp is integrating into it, and it ruffles the fabric up. So it's this lovely, it's a really bouncy fabric. It's got a beautiful hand feel to it,
so much texture,
and yeah, it just creates this lovely texture. And I love actually seeing it on the furniture. We've seen it on some beautiful kind of end of bed stools, and it really draws your eye into the room with it.
I think that sort of tactility is really important to us too. It's about, you know, that's why sort of we were drawn to weave, because you can really feel it. Like you know, it's the sort of things that they make you want to touch them, and that's really kind of something that you'll find in all of our fabrics. It's about the feel as much as it is the aesthetic.
Speaking of that, should we talk about brocades a bit? Speaking of tactility and for anyone who doesn't know yet, Caroline and Dylan make this incredible running yardage that we've been talking about. All of it is, again, made by hand on these pedal looms in these workshops by, these like incredibly experienced and knowledgeable and talented craftspeople. And then they also have another product line that they produce with a community of Maya weavers. There's a women's cooperative that really focuses on traditional weaving techniques of the Maya, including backstrap loom weaving. And so Caroline and Dylan, with that group of weavers, makes this incredible set of very special brocade panels that we're going to get into. One of the things that I find so incredible that kind of blew my mind once I finally wrapped my head around it is that, we tend to think of brocades as being like a woven that has, kind of like a different, some kind of pattern embroidered on top of it. But with these brocade panels, they're actually being woven and embroidered at the same time. So the embroidery actually lives in the actual weave. And I think we have a video clip also that just kind of shows one set of women like in the forest with these backstrap looms weaving panels, and you'll be able to see that they're called backstrap looms because they're literally, there's a piece of cloth or a piece of leather that wraps around the weaver's waist, and then there's the I guess the loom or the warp, and then the other end of it attaches to either a post or a tree or something else. And so that's the pan, just incredibly special ancient method of weaving. I think Katerina's got the video. Okay, so let's watch this.
What's great about these looms as well for the women, you can roll them up and take them anywhere with you. So some of the weavers, they'll work from home, they can stay at home, look after the children. We do also try to get the women to do some group weaving as well together, because we think it's a really good experience for everyone working together. And again, as what we said before, kind of learning off each other, and someone will give someone else a little extra tip on their work.
So essentially, the backstrap weaving is the most sort of authentic Mayan weaving that goes back. We don't really know how long it goes back. A long time. Mm-hmm. So it could be 1,000 years, could be more. And it's weaving with quite simple tools, as in readily available materials: a bit of string, a bit of rope, a bit of wood, a bit of leather for the strap. And so it's quite accessible, as in it doesn't cost a lot for that loom. It doesn't require a lot of space. It rolls up, as Caroline was saying. Mm-hmm. And it's really what Mayan women would use and still use today brilliantly. It's still very much alive in Guatemala to make their huipiles, which is their sort of their tunics that they wear. The shape of them is a very sort of simple shape. But the designs that they weave on them are just the most incredible feats of weaving, using all sorts of colors and designs. So they would actually be each location, each sort of village or town and community will have their own designs and their own colors that they use for their own huipiles, and they're kind of identified by that. And so it's a very traditional form of weaving, which we knew about before going to Guatemala, and was probably really one of the big attractions to go there, because we knew we'd find these fantastic weavers that would make these beautiful, colorful textiles. But we knew that we could do something with it. We knew that we could adapt it to work within interiors and to work within a very different context, essentially. And so yeah, that's how it kind of started. And from the beginning, we started working with actually this group here, and it's been a long relationship ever since.
Yeah, but you can really see from the videos how they are. It's panel pieced. It is very different to roll fabrics, and that was part of the process in the beginning. I mean, we kind of set our standard panel prices and worked with the weavers for the maximum width is essentially based off on how they can reach their arms around around the loom. So we kind of had to set what would be the maximum to work with everyone. And then also when we started developing it, the brocades work fantastically in cushions, and that was essentially a given. But we also at the very beginning started upholstering the fabrics onto furniture, because it's got this, you can create all these different beautiful patterns, and we love the idea of using this as feature panels. And with furniture as well, you can panel pieces together, and even some, depending on the furniture styles that you pick, you can almost slot the panels into the sections of the furniture. But we really loved the idea of giving this style of weaving, which is essentially made for these very small items of clothing, but expanding and broadening, I guess, its use that we could essentially promote.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always so blown away by how interior designers use any product. Like, I think that's one of the most fun things, is to see how designers use different goods, and especially with these panels, people use them in super cool ways. We've got a couple of examples here, just, using them to upholster different parts of chairs, and, kind of highlighting them that way. And then I think go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great example of, that was so when we sort of launched the business, we did one of our first trade shows, we met Kit Kemp, and then who went on to use the brocade in this really creative, really interesting way, and it just looks extraordinary. It really makes such an impact, and she's always been a fantastic supporter of artisan made textiles and all sorts of goods, and it was real honor for us to work with her, and it really gave us a sort of a boost, and also showed just the creativity, what you can do with that creativity, essentially. And so we, chairs like doing the chair in the Nika there, we did a lot of trying to show people how you can use it, because we don't want people, it's kind of that thing of people buying a beautiful textile and not knowing what to do with it, so it ends up in a drawer. And we think it's too beautiful to do that. You should live with it and enjoy it all the time. So this is an example of the Palomar and as a headboard around the bed, which is one of our, you can't see us actually, but it's one of the
you have a Palomar panel there.
There, but you can even see in here, this is using working with a slightly different group from a different area, Chichi Castanango, where they've got a style of weaving that is just so incredibly beautiful and so detailed, that we've been wanting to connect with a group there for a long time. And then it was actually kind of a chance meeting at a bus stop with a lady weaving, and a conversation sort of from meeting her. And now we work with a group of sort of 10, 11 weavers there who weave this for us. And because of the preciseness of their weaving, the tiny stitches, they can make these it's allowed Caroline to design more intricate patterns with which
actually this is the first curve that we ever produced or designed in A Rum Fellow, but it's a really beautiful technique, as Dylan said, and it's so intricate. Designing the Palomar pattern, it was almost a little bit like paint by numbers, and it was amazing to see the transition from the artwork that I gave to them, that they completely realized it exactly as every stitch that I had designed.
It is amazing. Like even still now, we've been working with this fabric for a long time. Whenever we receive a shipment, and opening it just was still in awe at the work, at the skill, at the detail, at the consistency. You know, they really are. They're kind of like works of art. Every single piece of the brocade is like a work of art. You know, it can take sort of weeks to make to weave a panel because it's slow and it's a very intricate process. And so it's just incredibly beautiful, and it feels quite. For us, it still feels like an honor to be able to work with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I love, like, it would be great for you guys to like show us up close a panel and like the back of the panel, but before we take down the kind of like the screen share, like one of the things that I know we were talking about this earlier, but one of the things that I love here too is like, this like ancient technique, like being used to create these beautiful goods that then can live in these like modern contemporary spaces. It's just such a cool kind of, sort of like nexus of, ancient and fresh and traditional and modern. And it just kind of like it's got this incredible energy that's just quite unique.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something that we're very clear from the outset with A Rum Fellow, is that we wanted to use all these traditional craft techniques, but we didn't want to create kind of museum pieces. We wanted to do something new with it and make something modern and make something relevant for interiors and the people and the designers that we work with today. So I think this is this is just from our new photo shoot, but this is one of my favorite images that really does sum up the modern and craft together, along with the color palette that we use as well in there.
So great. Katerina, would you take down the screen share? Because that might help us like get kind of like a closer view.
So it's the front, as you can see it on there, and then you've got in the back, you can see all, I don't know if you can see it so well, but all the individual stitches where it's been tied off, you'll see. So, all of this is happening behind the textiles as they're weaving, and that's why you're limited in the width, because they need to be able to get either side at the back to actually do the tying off, and with all the kind of essentially what's embroidered in, and also they're quite little, so they haven't got.
And they're sort of working. They're working with like a shuttle and a needle at the same time, right? Like they're working with a shuttle to kind of weave, and then a needle to kind of embroider, and that's happening simultaneously as they build up the pattern.
I was going to say, actually, we find different weavers use slightly different techniques, but yes, some of them do literally. So they essentially embroider onto the warp thread. So they've got the thicker, blunt needle, and especially actually, I think when you get into these finer details of the design, they are using the needle to kind of pick out those specific yarns and work in there. In maybe larger or more simple designs, they will use, they call it a sword. It's a flat, very smoothly shaped wooden stick with a sharper end, and it makes an amazing sound when they use it, because if you imagine all the warp threads have a lot of tension in them, and it's just like ting, 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 like they're picking up, they're counting and picking up all the yarns and then running the yarn through in those places. Both ways are amazing to watch and see them.
So cool. Well, I could talk to you both about this like all day long, literally. I see that there's a question that got popped into the Q&A thread, and if anybody else has questions, feel free to pop them in there. But someone's saying, these fabrics are fascinating and beautiful. I'm sold. And they're wondering how the process happens with the patterns. Like, are they traditional patterns, or are you designing the patterns and then working with them to execute them? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, especially with regards to the brocades?
Yeah. So with the with the process of the design, I mean, essentially my very starting point is the techniques and the looms that the weavers are working on, especially in the brocade. And brocade have definitely got a lot more freedom of how you can implement the design. So yes, I design it here, and as I send them, you know, if we're on a trip that we're visiting them back in the old days, you know, sometimes we'll take out even life-size printouts so they can literally count the stitches onto their warp yarns and get it exactly like the design.
Which you can imagine when you've got that many stitches is quite a detailed design.
Yeah. And I guess for me, for my inspiration, you know, I really am inspired by everything around me, and in some ways I would say that I see a lot of forms in the idea of shapes when I'm looking at, you know, it could be nature, it could, I mean, architecture obviously lends itself very easily to these kind of structures and shapes, and I very much use that in building the way that I build the patterns. And actually it's worked out really kind of serendipitously in meeting the weavers and their techniques, because with the weaves and the brocades, it does lend itself very much to geometric shapes. And you even see in their traditional designs like icons of animals that they're surrounded by. There's a lot of mountains and volcanoes there, so that definitely, you know, will flow into their traditional designs as well.
Amazing. Well, I know we've all got busy lives, so even though I could keep going on forever and ever and ever, we can let everybody get back to it, including you guys. But just want to let everyone know that because the webinar was recorded, it will be posted on Schumacher's YouTube channel. So you can kind of watch it at any time. Or, you know, if you want to forward it to anyone. And you can check out all of A Rum Fellow's beautiful textiles on fschumacher.com, and also visit A Rum Fellow's site to learn more about everything they do and to see some of their amazing videos as well as their amazing goods. And Caroline and Dylan, I can't thank you enough for joining me. You guys are amazing, and we love working with you and working with the Rum Fellow, and we love what you do, and we love, you know, spreading the A Rum Fellow word.
Well, we massive thank you to yourself and also to Schumacher as well for all of your support. You know, I think it's been an incredible journey so far working with you, and it's really. It's just so fantastic for us to have that kind of support from a bigger company in doing what we do. And Schumacher got a real passion for how things are made and for really getting down into the processes. And have got a passion for creating things. And I think that's just shown all the way through our relationship. So yeah, thank you guys for working with us.
That's our pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Hopefully somewhere live soon at some point. But sooner than that, probably another screen somewhere soon.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks so much.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.